Who raised you more, your parents, your grandparents, or someone else?
When my mother said the words, I thought she was joking. She had that tone half cheerful, half sharp, the one she used when she wanted to wrap an insult in tinsel and call it tradition. Sweetheart, since you and Tom don't have kids, we thought you'd probably want a quiet Christmas this year. You know, adults need rest too. For a second, I laughed, because what else can you do when your family decides you're suddenly too childless to qualify as one of them? But then there was silence. That heavy, deliberate kind that makes you realize you're not talking to someone who's kidding. My mother meant it. It hit harder than I expected. Not because I wanted to spend the holiday watching Mark's twins spill hot chocolate on the couch or listening to Lindsay complain about how hard motherhood is while scrolling her phone. I'd done enough of those Christmases to know they felt more like unpaid babysitting than family bonding. What stung was the principle of it, the quiet way they decided that being a woman without children somehow made me less worthy of a chair at the table. As if my life had expired the moment I didn't produce a grandchild. I remember holding the phone tighter and trying to sound casual. So, it's just, you guys and the kids this year? I asked, already knowing the answer. Mom's voice brightened like a spotlight. Yes, just something small, for the little ones. You know how crazy it gets. She laughed, that short, polite laugh that always follows exclusion. I said, sure, Mom, I get it, and hung up before my voice betrayed me. Tom was in the kitchen, making coffee the way he does, calm, precise, as if every movement was intentional. So, he said without turning, what did the Mitchell clan decide this time? I wanted to say nothing, but the words came out cracked. Apparently, childless women are seasonal accessories. Out of style this year. He turned then, eyes narrowing. They uninvited you? I shrugged, pretending not to care, but my chest burned. Not uninvited. Just excluded politely. The truth was, I had seen this coming. Every year, the comments had grown more pointed. Last Christmas, when I brought a bottle of champagne instead of a casserole, Mom said, "Oh, that's nice, dear. The childless always bring bubbles." Everyone laughed, even Dad, though he looked uncomfortable after. My family measures love in grandchildren and casseroles. I had neither, and therefore, in their eyes, nothing to contribute. That night, I sat on the couch, scrolling through old photos of Christmases past, the forced smiles, the matching sweaters, the arguments that always erupted once the camera turned off. The more I looked, the less nostalgic I felt. I realized I didn't miss them. What I missed was the illusion that I belonged there. Tom sat down beside me, handed me a glass of wine, and said, you know, we could spend Christmas anywhere. I looked at him, half smiling. Anywhere? He nodded. Anywhere they don't measure your worth by the number of diapers you've changed. It sounded like a joke, but there was a quiet weight in his voice, something deliberate. I thought about that long after he went to bed. The idea of doing something radical, something selfish in the best way. I imagined a place with no schedules, no forced smiles, no Rachel. Can you take the kids for a minute? I imagined the sound of waves instead of whining. Freedom, dressed in sunshine. By morning, I'd already made up my mind. I woke early, brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and typed Luxury Beach Resorts Christmas Week. I didn't even tell Tom at first. I wanted it to feel like a secret rebellion. Every listing I scrolled through felt like a tiny act of revenge. Private villas, infinity pools, champagne breakfasts, no children allowed. I didn't even blink at the prices. If family was going to guilt me for being childless, then I'd at least enjoy the one perk that came with it. Money I didn't have to spend on toys or orthodontics. By the time Tom walked into the room, I had already entered my credit card number. He leaned over my shoulder and read the confirmation email aloud. 7 nights in a private ocean view villa with pool access. You're really doing it. I smiled without looking up. Apparently, I'm not part of this year's holiday. So I figured I'd make my own. He grinned and kissed the top of my head. You're dangerous when you're excluded. I laughed softly. They wanted me quiet. Let's give them quiet. That evening, I called my mother again, pretending it was just a casual check-in. Hey, Mom, just confirming your plan for the holidays, I said. She sounded cheerful, as if nothing strange had happened. Oh yes, dear. We're going to Mark's this year. The kids are so excited. You two should have a nice little break. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. We will, Mom. We booked a place by the water. Just us. There was a pause on the line, subtle, sharp. Oh, really? That sounds expensive. Her tone had changed. It was the sound of curiosity shading into disapproval. Not really, I said, lying smoothly. Just something simple. Quiet. I could almost hear her trying to calculate whether I was telling the truth. Finally, she said, well, have fun, dear. We'll miss you. It sounded polite, but underneath it, I caught the faintest hint of irritation, the kind that comes when someone expected you to sulk and you decided to shine instead. When I hung up, Tom was watching me. How'd that go? I sipped my coffee slowly. Perfect, I said. They think I'm staying home. He raised an eyebrow. You're planning something. I smiled, not wide, just enough to let him know he wasn't wrong. I'm planning peace, I said. And maybe a little revenge. Outside, the world was already draped in fake snow and blinking lights, the kind of cheerful noise that always made me feel strangely hollow. But this year, the emptiness felt different, not sad, not lonely. Liberating. For once, I wasn't waiting for someone else to make room for me. I was building my own table, and it came with a sea view. As I closed my laptop, I felt that unfamiliar warmth spreading through my chest. Not the kind that comes from forgiveness, but the one that comes from finally being done. Next year, maybe they'd remember my name when they plan their family holiday. Or maybe they wouldn't. Either way, they'd see it, every glimmering drop of turquoise water, every untouched cocktail, every quiet smile, and know that this time, I didn't need an invitation. The confirmation email glowed on my screen like a small, private fireworks show, and while the coffee went cold beside me and the neighborhood inflatable reindeer wagged its plastic head in the wind, I sat very still and let the first clean breath of the season move through me, because for the first time in years I wasn't bracing for the moment someone would thrust a sticky toddler into my arms and call it helping. I was planning something meticulous and quiet that would look like self-care. To anyone glancing quickly, yet would land with the precision of a well-timed cymbal crash in a room full of people who believed I should sit in the back row and clap for lives that looked more acceptable on Christmas cards than mine. I did not tell Tom about the second tab I opened, the one for the resort concierge whose cheerful bio included the dangerous sentence about curating personal moments, and I wrote to her the way I write briefs for high-stakes clients, friendly, efficient, and laced with a purpose I didn't fully admit out loud, asking whether the property could arrange a stocking display by the Poolside cabana using names I supplied, if they might place little chocolate coins inside and a small silver bell on each ribbon, because nostalgia is a lever as powerful as anger and far less traceable, and whether a photographer could pass by casually around golden hour to capture what I would call just some memories, though both of us knew memories have sharp edges when a family insists certain people do not count. While she confirmed that everything was absolutely doable, a phrase that always tells you money is working, I moved to logistics with the same calm I used to build marketing calendars. I scheduled the airport transfer. I booked a dinner on the sand for our first night with a note about a discreet musician who could play low enough for conversation, but high enough for the sound to carry into a phone microphone, and I reserved 2 morning spa slots under a package called Deep Renewal, which made me snort because it sounded like a cult with plush towels. Then I set a reminder to post nothing for several days before we left, starving the feed the way you starve a bonfire of oxygen, so the first flame back looks cinematic. And I created a close friends list that did not include my mother, but did include Lindsay, because if you want something repeated, you whisper it into the ear of a person who lives in captions. Tom patted in wearing those ridiculous plaid pajama pants he thinks are festive, and when he saw the list of calendar holds and the concierge thread, his eyebrows climbed in that pleasant, slightly alarmed way that says you are watching a woman load a slingshot with a velvet glove, and he said, without judgment, tell me the part I'm supposed to pretend I didn't understand. So I told him that we would not fight, we would not lecture. We would not even reference the sentence that started this. We would simply stage our own holiday the way people stage houses for sale, with soft textures and open sight lines and one striking focal point, and then we would let gravity pull the necessary eyes toward it while we acted surprised, generous, and a little amused. Because the one thing my family cannot metabolize is a lack of defensiveness. He laughed, kissed my shoulder, and asked whether we were bringing the fancy camera, which we were, but more important was the timing, so I laid it out, not as vengeance, but choreography. The first post would be a harmless boarding pass photo with the destination blurred and a caption about choosing quiet this year, which would ring polite and even slightly sad, inviting benevolent comments we would not answer. The second, set to publish mid-afternoon on the day my mother historically corrals everyone for a group shot in front of Mark's fireplace, would be a wide poolside frame with the stockings hung along the cabana beam and a casual line about starting our own tiny tradition, and, because names would be visible, Karen, David, Mark, even Lindsay. It would read like inclusion at first glance and exclusion at second, and the cognitive dissonance would do most of my work while I sipped something with a slice of lime and pretended to consider whether the water was warm enough for a swim. Still, pretty pictures without a moral pulse feel like bragging, so I arranged something I could defend in any courtroom of relatives, a donation to the resort's toy drive in my nieces' and nephews' names with little handwritten cards tucked into the boxes. A receipt I would not post, but would keep. A photograph I would share only if accused of selfishness, and I admit there was pleasure in designing a trap I hoped never to spring, because the most elegant reversals are built on decent acts. That also happened to embarrass people who expected you to sulk. When the concierge wrote back to say the silver bells were ordered and the photographer was confirmed, I felt that bright click I used to feel in college when I placed the final period on a paper at 3 in the morning and knew the argument held. And we celebrated not with a dance or a toast, but with a joint grocery list, because the real theater happens off stage, and while Tom debated which sunscreen wouldn't make him smell like a coconut, I drafted captions that sounded breezy and unsuspicious, trimming any edge that might let them accuse me of gloating, leaving only sun, water, and 2 people choosing peace like adults who read their own contracts. That night I called Dad instead of Mom, choosing the one person who has never been first to throw a stone, and I told him we'd be out of town, somewhere warm, which he received with a quiet that tasted like relief and regret mixed together. And when he said he hoped we'd rest, I told him we would, and I meant it, because rest is not the absence of conflict. It is the moment you stop auditioning for a part you were never going to get, and as we hung up he added, almost too soft to catch, send. A photo if you think of it, which I filed under clues that the ground is shifting, though not necessarily where you'd expect. On the morning we left, I slid my suitcase into the trunk and, with a flick of my thumb, scheduled the first post to publish just after boarding when the cabin would be closing and my phone would slide into airplane mode. Because there is a special kind of confidence in pressing a button and then being physically unable to backpedal, and as the jetway door sealed with that tired hiss and the seatbelt light chimed, Tom squeezed my hand and asked whether I was ready, and I said I was, which was true. Although ready is a generous word for a woman who has just lit the fuse on something she's promised to call serenity, and as the plane lifted through a shelf of winter cloud and the city flattened into a brushed steel model beneath us, my screen blinked with the first notifications I wouldn't see until landing, and somewhere on the other end of that traveling signal my mother, who believed she had removed me gently from the season, would be looking at a boarding pass and a blur and a sentence about quiet and reaching for a phone she would not yet use. The plane touched down just after noon, and by the time we stepped into the lobby of the resort, the heat had already worked its way under my skin like a quiet sedative, loosening the last knots of cold Midwestern tension that always seemed to anchor themselves to my spine around the second week of December. The staff greeted us with cool towels and sparkling water served in thin-stemmed glasses, and while Tom checked us in with his usual charm, all patience and low-voiced jokes, I wandered toward the edge of the open-air atrium where the view spilled wide onto the turquoise curve of the infinity pool, and beyond that, the sea itself, indifferent and sprawling and so far removed from group chats and guilt that I actually laughed, audibly. drawing a glance from a couple nearby who probably assumed I was high on rum or honeymooning. What I was feeling wasn't joy exactly, or not just joy, but something quieter and more potent, the kind of stillness that lives under vindication. It wasn't the trip itself, though the villa was every bit as stunning as the photos, with its pale stone floors and curved lines and open doors that blurred the line between indoor and sky. It was knowing that while I was here, sipping fresh pineapple juice and watching the water throw back the sun like it was made of mirrors, my family was trapped in the cold churn of suburban holiday rituals, trying and failing to manufacture moments that looked good on social media, but felt like tinsel wrapped around a ticking bomb. I had not yet posted anything. That was part of the plan. Let them stew in their version of Christmas, uninterrupted, while I gathered quiet ammunition. Because what my family never understood was that silence is not always submission. Sometimes it's just patience in disguise. By the second morning, the first texts started appearing. Nothing overt, just Mark in the family group chat posting a blurry photo of the kids in matching pajamas, both crying, one with a string of tinsel wrapped around his head like a failed crown. My mother chimed in with a forced, "We're having so much fun already," followed by 5 too many exclamation points. Then came Lindsay's update, a tray of burnt cinnamon rolls with the caption, "Nailed it," and an eye roll emoji, because sarcasm was her preferred method of admitting failure while still angling for praise. I watched the chaos from a sun lounger with my legs stretched long and an unread book resting on my stomach. Tom glanced over at my phone and said, "Should I be worried that you look this satisfied before coffee?" I shook my head slowly, never breaking eye contact with the screen. No, just observing. We let another day pass. We took a private boat to a reef where I floated in a depthless blue that made me feel like a ghost in the best possible way. We walked barefoot through a local market and bought a ridiculously overpriced woven basket just because the vendor had a laugh like falling rocks. We ate grilled fish on a quiet beach while a pair of tourists nearby proposed loudly in bad Spanish, and when they finally kissed, the entire restaurant applauded. It was messy and strange and perfect. But the best moment, the one I had timed like a glass drop on marble, came late afternoon on Christmas Eve, exactly 10 minutes after I knew my family would be assembling in Mark's living room for the annual fireplace photo. I had done it with them for years, always standing on the edge, holding someone else's child, wearing an itchy sweater my mother insisted I borrow for cohesion. This year, I waited until I saw the first blurry, underlit upload, my brother's fireplace, the stockings hanging slightly crooked, the children whining in the background, and then, with the kind of breath control reserved for sharpshooters and ex-wives, I tapped post on the photo I'd been sitting on for 2 days. It was a wide shot, me and Tom, poolside, cocktails in hand, the stockings hanging in a perfect line from the edge of the cabana, each one embroidered with the name of a family member who hadn't thought I'd be part of Christmas this year. The caption was short and precise, starting our own little tradition. Hope everyone's staying warm. Within minutes, my notifications lit up like fireworks in reverse. First, Lindsay reacted with a heart, then immediately unreacted, a social media flinch if ever there was one. My mother sent a private message that simply read, "Very nice," which in her language meant equal parts accusation and confusion. My father, ever the silent observer, responded with a thumbs-up emoji that I chose to interpret as surrender. Then came the group chat. "Mark, nice setup. Didn't know you were going away. Mom, looks beautiful. Must have been expensive. Lindsay, cute. Those stockings without kids is kind of symbolic. Rachel, everything's symbolic if you think hard enough." No one replied after that for a while. Tom raised his glass. "To symbolic stockings." I clinked mine against his and smiled. "And to silence that makes people think." The rest of the evening we didn't touch our phones. We watched the sun disappear in layers, each shade deeper than the last, and I thought about how many years I had spent trying to be a good sport, trying to laugh along, trying to accept that my presence was tolerated but never prioritized. I thought about the way people like my mother build ladders out of expectations and then get offended when you don't climb. Later that night, when the lights in the villa were dim and the air smelled like salt and lime and sunscreen, I opened my messages again. My father had sent a photo, just one, of their Christmas table, empty chairs around it, food still untouched, captioned simply, "Not the same without you." For a long time, I stared at the screen, unsure whether to feel vindicated or sad. Eventually, I wrote back, "Next year, I won't be a question mark. Either I'm in or I'm out. But I won't be a convenient afterthought." He didn't respond. But I saw that he read it. And for now, that was enough. The day after Christmas always carried with it a strange kind of emotional hangover, that sluggish haze where wrapping paper still littered corners of the house, leftovers became less a treat and more a responsibility. And everyone suddenly realized that whatever magic had been promised had once again failed to materialize. I knew this feeling intimately from years of trying to navigate the frayed edges of my family's holiday cheer. But this year, as I woke to the muted rustle of palm trees and the soft hush of waves filtering through the villa's open windows, the only weight I felt was the cool linen sheet across my legs. Tom was still asleep, his hand flopped over the edge of the bed in the way he always did when he was truly at ease, and I lay there quietly, staring at the ceiling fan and wondering whether I should even check my phone. I already knew the energy had shifted. There's a specific kind of silence that screams louder than confrontation, and judging by the complete absence of updates, passive-aggressive photos, or last minute, "Look how much fun we're still having," messages in the family group chat, I suspected something was simmering just under the surface. When I finally reached for my phone, there it was, the digital equivalent of a pot boiling over. 27 unread messages in the family group thread, most of them posted after midnight, likely after the kids had gone to bed and the wine had done its damage. I scrolled back to the beginning of the spiral, the moment it all began, and it wasn't even one of my posts that triggered it. It started with Mark, of all people, posting a photo of the living room after everyone had left, half-empty wine bottles on the counter, wrapping paper scattered like debris, one of the kids' new toys already broken on the floor. The caption read, "Next year, let's rent a damn hall. This house is too small for all this chaos." Lindsay jumped in seconds later with a snarky reply about how she told everyone not to bring full meals for 12, which was followed by Mom defending her decision to make real food because not everyone enjoys frozen appetizers. Lindsay, Dad, rarely a participant, chimed in dryly, "Maybe next year we'll just go to Rachel's villa instead." That one landed like a stone in a pond. Lindsay, "Wow. I guess we know where your favorite child is." Mom, "That was uncalled for." Mark, "Can we not fight about this at 1 in the morning? Rachel, me, "I haven't said a word. But feel free to keep going." And that's when the tone shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about the party or the food or even the villa. It became about me. Mom, "Rachel, you knew exactly what you were doing with those posts. You wanted us to see. You wanted to make a point." Rachel, "I wanted to spend the holiday somewhere I wasn't an afterthought." Lindsay, "You could have just said something instead of staging some kind of performance." Rachel, "I did say something. When Mom told me I wasn't part of this year's holiday." There was a pause after that, a digital breath, the kind where everyone's fingers hover over their keyboards, unsure whether to escalate or retreat. Mom, "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Rachel, "No, I think I finally understood it clearly." Tom stirred beside me, his voice hoarse and still wrapped in sleep. "Trouble in Christmas land?" I turned the phone screen toward him without speaking. He skimmed the thread and raised his eyebrows. "Looks like someone lit the tree from the bottom." He wasn't wrong. The meltdown had started small, but the emotional kindling had been piling up for years. And now that someone had struck the match, or rather, now that I had refused to smile through it, the whole carefully constructed image of family harmony was burning just bright enough to illuminate the cracks. I didn't respond again. I let them spiral. I spent the rest of the morning reading by the pool while the sun painted gold lines across the water, and when the waiter brought fresh juice and a small plate of fruit arranged like a magazine photo shoot, I took a picture but didn't post it. The point had already been made. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. A private message from Dad. Just 3 words, "You were right." No preamble, no apology, no defense of anyone else's actions, just that simple acknowledgement from a man who had spent most of his life choosing silence over discomfort. It felt heavier than all the other messages combined. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the words until the letters began to blur, until the meaning behind them settled into my chest like something warm and heavy and overdue. Then I typed back, I didn't want to be right. I wanted to be considered. No reply. But I didn't need one. Later that day, while Tom and I walked barefoot along the beach, watching small children build castles too close to the tide, I wondered if any of them would grow up to feel like they weren't invited to their own family's celebration simply because their life didn't unfold in the expected sequence of ring, child, mortgage, exhaustion. I thought about all the women I knew, friends, colleagues, even strangers online, who had stories like mine, whose families reduced them to just the aunt, who were assigned folding chairs at dinner or asked to step out of group photos because it's just for the parents and kids. And I realized that my post, my villa, my quiet revenge wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who's ever been made to feel like their life didn't count unless it was loud, messy, and replicating itself. That night, I posted one more photo. It wasn't of the pool or the food or the villa. It was a shadow photo, me and Tom walking along the beach, our silhouettes long and quiet and separate from the noise. The caption read, "Some traditions begin by leaving the old ones behind." And for once, I didn't care who saw it. We landed 2 days after New Year's, stepping out into the thick, flat cold of home with the kind of clarity that only comes when your body has recalibrated itself in a different climate and your soul no longer panics at the sound of your own ringtone. The air was gray and damp, the kind that sticks to your skin and reminds you that whatever escape you orchestrated is now complete, filed away under exceptions, and yet, as the taxi pulled up to our house and Tom hauled the bags inside, I didn't feel any of the usual dread that crept in after a trip. No slump, no quiet letdown, no tightening of the stomach in anticipation of unread messages or unspoken expectations. Instead, there was a wide, strange emptiness, like a hallway no longer crowded with shoes, and though it should have felt lonely, it didn't. We spent that first day doing everything and nothing at once. Laundry cycles hummed, groceries were restocked, emails were half-skimmed and half-ignored, and somewhere between unpacking the last bottle of hotel shampoo and deleting the resorts, "Hope to see you again soon" email, I realized I hadn't heard from anyone in my family since the final ripple in the group chat. No follow-up apologies, no guilt-tripped attempts at reconciliation, no sudden pivot into small talk, as though nothing had happened. Just silence. Which, in our family, had always been the most layered form of communication. It wasn't that I expected a grand apology or a hallmark moment of reconciliation, the kind where someone knocks on your door holding a foil-covered tray and a sheepish expression. I knew my mother too well for that. I knew she would sit in her kitchen replaying every conversation we'd ever had, mentally re-editing her own lines until they no longer sounded harsh, convincing herself she hadn't excluded me so much as protected me from the burden of children's noise. I knew Mark would roll his eyes and say I was too sensitive, while Lindsay would deliver a passive-aggressive Instagram story about some people weaponizing peace. I even knew that Dad, despite his late-night truth, would likely revert to his usual diplomacy, playing both sides until the conflict wore itself out like a storm that runs out of ocean. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't quite predict, was how unbothered I would feel. In the days that followed, as I returned to my regular routines and watched the holiday decorations slowly disappear from front yards like embarrassed confetti, I noticed a shift I couldn't easily name. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt free. And that was new. The freedom wasn't in the absence of the argument. It was in the absence of performance. I no longer felt compelled to defend my life, to justify my choices, to contort myself into something more acceptable at the family table. I had said what needed to be said, not through a monologue but through action, through presence in a place they never expected me to be, centered, unapologetic, and still. One evening, as Tom and I sat on the couch with bowls of too salty popcorn and a movie we abandoned halfway through, I opened the family group chat again. It had gone dormant, a relic now, with the last message being my father's quiet agreement followed by Mark's defensive joke about needing a group therapist. The silence stretched beneath it like a clean sheet, untouched, unresolved, unacknowledged. I didn't type anything. I simply watched it, let my thumb hover over the keyboard, and then set the phone down without engaging. The next week, a cream-colored envelope arrived, not a card, not a call, just an envelope with my mother's handwriting across the front and a postmark that told me it had been sent before New Year's, but likely delayed by snow. Inside was a single page, folded neatly, with only 2 lines written in her familiar, loopy cursive, "Next year, you're welcome to come. I mean that. Love, Mom." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the sentence that started all of this, no mention of stockings or villas or blurry fireplace photos. Just that one line, simple, cautious, and thoroughly her. I read it once, then again, and then tucked it back into the envelope without showing it to Tom. Not because I was hiding anything, but because some gestures are less about their message and more about what they cost the sender to write. I didn't reply. Not immediately. Instead, I sat with the words, not as an invitation to return, but as a signal that something, however small, had shifted. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was the kind of reconciliation that happens quietly in the shadows of someone else's discomfort. Or maybe it was nothing more than obligation wrapped in sentimentality. I couldn't know, and honestly, I didn't need to. Because the truth was, I had already chosen myself. I had built something new, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I had learned to stop waiting for someone to hand me belonging and had instead planted it in the ground beneath my own feet, watered it with clarity, and watched it grow under a sun no one could block. Whether I spent next Christmas under a palm tree or in a snow-covered city, it would be on my terms, with or without them. And that, I realized, was the gift I never knew I was allowed to give myself.